2023 is set to be a banner year for the fighting game genre. From a burgeoning indie scene full of unique takes like the forthcoming rhythm-based God of Rock, to the latest entries from the titans of the scene, with both Tekken and Street Fighter's latest installments due for arrival over the next 12 months, there is certainly a lot to be excited for. There is also a lot of discourse around fighting games, their inclusivity, how good you have to be, and on what level people can and do enjoy them. I've never really gotten into that particular topic, as to me, I've always enjoyed them, regardless of my own skill level or the mode I play. From sprawling single-player story modes, like the latest NetherRealm Studios games Injustice and Mortal Kombat, to the traditional arcade modes in single-player, the offline and online multiplayer, whether against friends or strangers, in tournaments, in casual matches, or just having a laugh with friends around. There is so much to be enjoyed. Whilst I may not be au fait with a lot of the terminology used by those in the know, I'm able to really describe FADCs and FTSEs, or be able to recite matchups and tier lists, and let's be honest, I know about as much about frame data as I know about art frames. But I do know what I like and what I love, and I love fighting games. I've been a fan ever since Street Fighter 2 released in 1991 and swept over the world. Sure, my arcade stick purchase may have been based more on the fact that I think they're cool and I've always wanted one, rather than a tangible investment on a win-loss ratio, but I still feel that there is room for all kinds of fans in the FGC, or fighting game community, regardless of skill level or knowledge, even if that doesn't mesh with some of the more hardcore purists' ideologies. So, with that being said, I wanted to make a list of my favourite fighting games of all time, my top 10. This may not be an objectively definitive best fighting games or the ultimate fighting games, they're merely based on my experiences playing them, the ones that I spent the most time with and the people I played them with and I had the most fun with. So with that being said, please enjoy the video, let me know in the comments down below what your favourite fighting games are, and let me know what you think of my list. Without further ado, let's get started. I wanted to start this list off with not necessarily the worst of the 10, and honestly a lot of this list could be interchangeable just purely based on my mood. However, I wanted to start off this top 10 with a game that really encapsulated my feelings towards the whole list, and my feelings towards fighting games in general. So, Skullgirls comes in at number 10 purely as I fell in love as soon as I saw this game. The slick animation, the striking visual style, the unique characters, and then obviously hearing the extremely cool music. I can't lie, whilst I've tried to avoid being influenced by people in making this top 10, I can't say that I haven't been influenced by people in my love for the games, and I was massively influenced by Matt McMuscles and Wooly from the then super best friends, as you can see here in game, to get this game upon its release. Now, its art style may sure not look as fresh as it did back then to some people, purely because that art style has been copied so many times. It was very popular at the time and kind of spawned a few indie competitors and clones, but I think that's a testament to how good the game really is. Even to the point where I actually even played the mobile version of Skullgirls 2, that's how much I enjoyed it. Something that can't be said of most games in general, let alone fighting games. So whilst I may not have sunk the hours in, certainly in the arcade or back in the 90s, that I have with others on this list, that by no means diminishes the impact that Skullgirls had, and therefore it definitely deserves its spot cracking into the top 10. I could have put a few different Mortal Kombat games on this list. It was hard to follow any kind of rules in making this list to avoid it being overran by any one franchise, so I looked at which games had the biggest impact on me. Whilst Mortal Kombat 1 certainly grabbed the world's attention, the actual game itself wasn't exactly the most fluid experience. And I honestly think, outside the novelty of the fatalities, the game itself wasn't that great, looking back with hindsight. But it did set up an amazing sequel that over-delivered and bettered everything the first game did correctly, despite having one of the most notoriously cheap AIs to ever steal your quarters. Whilst the new trilogy, Mortal Kombat's 9, 10 and 11, have all been amazing and fun, with great in-depth story modes, awesome guest characters that all of us millennial, borderline Gen X kids got to relive our favourite 80s and 90s movie days with the likes of Robocop, Terminator, Predator, Alien, etc. But Mortal Kombat 2 is probably the game that had the biggest impact on me. The fact that it continues to this day as a series is probably down to the fact that Mortal Kombat 2 was just so big. It made such a huge impact on people. It really did improve in every single way from the first game, to a point where I think the series would have died if it had just continued the way the first game had. But the second one improved so much on everything. The visuals, the characters, the special moves, the increasing of the types of different fatalities and stuff. The popularity, sure, may have had some aspect of teenage edgelords to it, but it doesn't take away the fact that this had a huge impact on everyone who played it, and yeah, it still continues to have a big place in a lot of people's hearts to this day. Looking back at my local arcade, I never realised how lucky I had it in terms of getting the latest releases and some of the biggest games that would stand the test of time in the fighting game genre. But in my defence, I was simply too busy enjoying them, and I don't think any could typify that attitude more than Killer Instinct 2. How do I remember? Because simply no other game gave me that many blisters from playing the heck out of it like Killer Instinct 2 did. The fast-paced combat, those awesome combos, the amazing soundtrack with the heavy bass line. I spent more time in my arcade as a teen than I ever spent at college, which probably shows to this day. And whilst I never had the home port, I spent more than enough hours in the 90s plowing hours in at the arcade with the likes of Tusk and Kim Woo to ensure I stayed top of the local leaderboard. And even though it wasn't the biggest or the most competitive scene compared to the American arcade scene, I certainly got my money's worth in terms of enjoyment from those days. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that before Robert Downey Jr. donned the now iconic red and gold armour in 2008, there were only a few niche communities who really knew Iron Man. Outside the comic book community, the cartoon community, most people, if you said Marvel to them, sure, they'd know of Spider-Man and Hulk, but Iron Man? Not a chance. That was for the quote-unquote nerds to know about. So it was really this game that showed me the potential of the wider world of comic book characters in a way that just completely blew me away at the time. I was used to standard Street Fighter combat, from the Shotos to the charge characters, so the exotic world of air juggles, gem usage, this game just blew me away in a way that no other fighting game had. Even 3D games with their very lofty jumping mechanics never really had this kind of dual plane, I guess, fighting mechanic, from the ground-based game to this huge air and juggling game. The huge colourful sprites battling across the screen, and then again followed on by X-Men Children of the Atom and the following Versus series with Street Fighter and Capcom in general. Marvel superheroes just really opened my eyes to a larger fighting game world outside of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter alone, and fighting in different ways. and it had a huge impact that still lasts to this day. I still go back to this game, even though we've had several dozen sequels since then. Following on from the previous entry Marvel superheroes, now it's time to branch out into yet a different dimension. That's right, the third dimension. While the list so far has been populated by titles that have defined the 2D in either the drawn or digitised sprite form, I also enjoyed 3D fighters. And whilst they don't make up the majority of this list, they certainly log the hours in many of the classics, from the Samurai Shodown and DOA series to Bloody Roar, and even the Final Fight and Street Fighter EX series. I'll admit, I was a Sega kid growing up, but despite my friend having a Saturn, I never really got into the early Virtua Fighter titles. However, that all changed with Virtua Fighter 5. Picked up on a whim, I soon sank countless hours back in the 360 days in on Virtua Fighter 5. The game felt so in-depth and fluid in a way previous titles hadn't really sold me on, and being able to play online taught me many harsh lessons about my actual skill level in fighting games, but never in a way where I walked away to never play again, but in wanting to get one more match in, just to try and get at least one win, or at least one round in. I've previously made a video on Sega neglecting a lot of their premium racing genre, and they really need to start resurrecting its other genres too, and I'd be more than happy to see a Virtua Fighter 6 at some point down the line, rather than just their characters guest starring in DOA or other fighting games.
Knockout!
You'll never be a match for me.
Here comes a new challenger.
Okay, breaking into the top 5, and this is where it starts getting really serious, as it starts getting harder and harder to place titles, and rules about one entry per series get thrown out the window, as it gets harder to tell which game I spent more time with, and therefore which game has a holder of my heart in a more telling way. Sometimes it's about which one I spent solo hours in, other times it's about where I spent more time socially with friends and having epic gaming sessions, which is much a part of the reason as the game itself. So, despite Tekken 3 being a far superior game to Tekken 2, I can't find it in my heart to separate the two. PlayStation in the mid to late 90s had a way of making non-traditional fighting players, or at least gamers in general, you could argue, get involved in a way that wasn't really seen before. It really changed the landscape of who was or wasn't a quote-unquote gamer, and I don't think we've seen that again until the Smash Brothers series. And so late night tournaments with Tekken 2 was amazing fun. Everyone would come in, everyone would want to get involved, whether they were guys or girls, everyone wanted to have fun with it. PlayStation really took that whole image of games being for children and really took it out into the mainstream, and both of those games really sold me on it. Tekken 3, like I said, was the better game, and it had the different game modes that people enjoyed more, but down to the fact that I spent a lot more time on Tekken 2. I think when Tekken 3 came out, I was starting to work in bars and nightclubs, so I didn't really have the social time that I did with number 2. So I think for that reason, I can't choose between the two. I had so much fun with both of them, and that's why they're making a joint appearance here at number 5, Tekken 2 and Tekken 3. Just missing out on the top 3, in no small part due to my own shortcomings in not being as fluent in the fighting system of the series, is Ultimate Marvel vs Capcom 3. I'd love to say Marvel vs Capcom 2, and it certainly had a better roster in my opinion, I think in most people's, but purely for the fact that I spent more time playing this, and the fact that I had a home copy rather than just spending time in the arcades, Ultimate Marvel vs Capcom gets the number 4 nod, and it's the highest placed Marvel entry in this list. So unfortunately, anyone expecting Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I'm afraid you're out of luck, but it does get an honourable mention. This game is just pure fun, whether you're a hardcore competitive player, a casual fan like myself, or even someone who doesn't even really get into fighting games but you have a passing knowledge of pop culture. There is something for everyone to enjoy. From the now worldwide recognised Marvel characters, the very best and brightest of Capcom's series, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 certainly had everything that I personally would want from a crossover game. The gameplay, the mechanics, and now I couldn't tell you about the nuances and intricacies of those like a Justin Wong or a Max Dude could, but I can tell you that I had so much fun playing this game. And I still feel like I learn something new every time I see it and play it. Plus, with a huge amount of combinations of teams, there's always a reason to go back and try. And that's not even including the fact that nowadays the scene seems to be like burgeoning again due to the fact that the modding community has really taken this game to heart, and a lot of new characters are being added, or they're being reskinned as new characters. It really is amazing. Now, I haven't played the modded version, I only have the vanilla console version, but I still have so much fun, and if I get a decent PC set up in the future, I'm definitely going to be heading to that modding community, because this game as it is amazing fun, and with the added stuff that's being brought into it, just brings a whole new dimension to what is already a classic game.
Didn't even need my spider sense for that one.
I doubt many people would be surprised that there would be at least one Street Fighter game or two on this list, and whilst there were plenty of choices that could have seen me through, especially given the 90s and the amount of Street Fighter 2 versions there were, it was really Alpha 2 that really captured my heart in the 90s. The anime aesthetic, that improved roster from Alpha 1, bringing it to a level of characters that were seen in Street Fighter 2 or the Super Street Fighter 2 levels. The counter system, the supers, the music, everything about this appealed to all my sensibilities. From little aspects like the stages to the opening cinematics, it made everything so cool, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. And everything was so fluid that I couldn't not love it. In one of the rare turns, I didn't actually enjoy the sequel as much as I enjoyed this one. Usually, especially with fighting games, they get better with each iteration, but for me, Alpha 2 was the peak of the series rather than 3, even though it had the expanded roster. 2 just felt iconic. I adored Sakura as a new character. I felt that she brought more character to Ryu than he ever did himself, until we got to Hot Dad Ryu at least. I spent so much money on this game, it's not even funny, and I was absolutely gutted when Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Edition came out and this wasn't the one that had online play, that instead going to Alpha 3. It was really hard to choose a Street Fighter title without giving all spots to 10 different titles. Is there going to be another one later in the list? Maybe, but Alpha 2, sure, to this day, it really stands out for me for everything it did right, and it certainly deserves to be in the top 3. Coming in at number 2, the runners-up spot was a tough call to make. Almost anyone who looks at my online stats and win-loss ratio may be confused as to why this ranks so high. Like I said before, this isn't a list of games that I think are objectively the best, nor the ones I'm the best at. And certainly I don't think over the last decade, another game has come out that I've put more time into and had more fun with in the fighting game sphere than Killer Instinct 2013. Building on my already professed love for the series, shown in Killer Instinct 2's entry earlier in this very list, not only the fact that I chose to go down the Xbox route in consoles instead of the PlayStation, meaning that I didn't really get as much time with Street Fighter V, even when I did, Killer Instinct just seemed to just get so much more correct than Street Fighter V did, and therefore for that particular generation of consoles, Killer Instinct just crushed it for me in a way that Street Fighter V or DOA and countless others haven't managed to achieve. A lot of the reason for that is the way the game was released. Like I said, mentioning those games, the microtransactions and the pricing of the game, it really felt like fighting games were being taken away from a lot of core players in that generation. But Killer Instinct just nailed it in terms of having the rotating fighter, and you could choose which fighters, or you could buy the fighting bundle and you could just have all the characters to choose with. It was fantastic the way they did that. But now let's talk about the actual game itself, because it was awesome. It refined everything that made it what it was in the 90s. The looks, the feel, the sound of the game, the characters, the weight and feel of the moves, the combo, and then the combo breaker and counter breaker systems, and then they introduced the shadow moves, the presentation, even the trailers, everything about this game I thoroughly enjoyed. It took all the nostalgia, but it modernized it and brought it in a way that it didn't feel cheap or it didn't feel like a cash in. It felt new, it felt exciting, and it felt like a group of developers who really cared about the original games wanted to bring it to a new audience, and I think they really delivered in that. Its inclusion onto Games Pass obviously no doubt helped it, and I really hope that the fact that it's kind of died off a little bit now, but I think with more people getting back into fighting games and this year being a banner year for them, I really hope that Microsoft looks at that and they see the big influencers like, I know I keep going on about the Max dudes, the Matt McMuscles, the Justin Wongs, but you know, when you get big content creators like that with the hashtag #BringBackKI, I really hope that they pay attention to that, because this could be a massive flagship fighter for Microsoft, and I hope that they listen to the big voices in the community who are asking to bring it back. I certainly would love to throw my weight behind it, even as just a little nobody on the internet. This game was amazing, and yeah, it definitely stands out head and shoulders above most of the other games that I've played in the last 10 years as a fighter, and deserves a number 2 spot.
Supreme victory! Here comes a new challenger.
Okay, now we get here. Number 1, Street Fighter 3, Third Strike. I mean, obviously, right? Now look, I haven't watched any of the recent greatest top 10 videos from any of the top content creators or the Watch Mojos of this world, as I've been meaning to get this video done for myself for way too many months. And now, whilst I've finally conquered my procrastination and I'm getting on, I didn't want to be swayed subconsciously or unconsciously by anyone else's lists. I wanted to do it for myself. But that being said, I don't think it's a big surprise to say that over the years I have been influenced in my love for fighting games, whether it's by the likes of video games, the Super Best Friends like Batsu, and whilst I've never watched a Mojo list, I expect that anyone who plays fighting games would probably be agreeing with me that Street Fighter 3 Third Strike deserves to be the number 1 game on the list. For me, it just has everything. It does everything right. It kept and changed everything. Everything that was great about Street Fighter, it brought it all with it. The fighters, the combos, the feel and the smoothness, the mechanics, the counters, the fact that you can pretty much match up anyone against anyone and still have a chance. It was amazing. But then it changed everything too. The hip-hop enthused attitude, from the sounds to the aesthetic, even down to the little details, like when you get a perfect, you get a voice going, "Yeah, that's cool," instead of the stock audio, "perfect," in a stilted voice. And let's not even start on the soundtrack. Oh, that soundtrack, the greatest soundtrack of any fighting game ever, period. I don't even want to hear any arguments, because it was amazing. And that's before we even get into how the game actually feels and plays. And no matter how good you are at it or how bad you are at it, I might not be any better than your average casual player. I'm certainly not a competitive fighter, I'm certainly not a great tournament player or anything like that. Heck, I wouldn't even call myself a scrub lord. I think that's something to aspire to from where my position is. But I can still appreciate everything about this game, whether I can pull it off or whether I just see it being done by other people. The parrying, the combos, the matchups, the taunts with Q, which some people got salty about because they didn't realise was part of his gameplay, which is hilarious to me. I think you can be as shallow with this game, or you can go as deep into this game as you want, and you're going to be rewarded accordingly. This game has everything. The fighters, they cater to no matter what style of play you have. The art style, which is so visually striking. The soundtrack, like I said, I mean, I still listen to that soundtrack in daily life. I'm going out walking the dog or something, yeah, I'll put it on. I'm going to the shops, yeah, it's on in my headphones. This top 10 list was hard, and took a long time to prepare and took a long time to write, but yeah, you can guarantee that I started from number 1 and worked my way back, because there was never any question that this game was going to be the number 1 top spot. As the game itself tells you, yeah, that makes sense.
Are you ready? Go!
We await your return, warrior.